essentially, he just said, I've already reviewed maybe 5 to 10 hours in my whole Fortnite career, and I think it's mainly a waste of time since it's Fortnite, not CSGO. People just assumed he was trolling instantly. Like, I don't want to scroll too far in case someone put something dumb in here, but like, the general like consensus from a lot of people was like there's no way he's being serious. Like, how is this guy who we all view as one of the smartest, most intelligent, and not just smartest and intelligent, but just one of the greatest players to play the game? How does he feel this way? Calc responded. I always love seeing this picture in my fucking timeline. Calc responded saying that it's the same for him and Zextra and Macwood. And I know this is true for Zextra because in the interview I did with Zextra a while ago, Zextra, we literally spoke about this in the interview I did, so you can go check that out on my YouTube channel. And essentially, it's something that I think a lot of people are struggling to understand just because of how wild it seems, especially when we have a community where we have so much VOD review. I wouldn't say so much VOD review, but we have a lot of people who stress the importance of VOD reviewing, right? I'm someone who does as well. But what people don't understand about this is the fact that this applies to mainly like the top players, like the elite players, and not for everyone, not even for all the elite players, but this is a concept I spoke about a really long time ago, where when you get to that stage in the game, and you get to this point of like a Zayt, you have that privilege of you don't have to go back and VOD review everything, simply because a lot of the mistakes you're going to be making are mistakes where you'll actually just pick that up. Like when you're at that level, if you've made a mistake, most likely it's going to be the main cause of your like death or your demise within that game, and so it's easy to acknowledge that and fix that for next time. Where if you have your game plan planned out, if you understand how to play the game, there's not going to be much value in VOD reviewing for 10 hours a day, right? Whereas somebody who's new to competitive Fortnite, who's never, really played a scrim, who doesn't understand the game too well, it's going to be valuable for them to VOD review for hours and hours a day. Do you guys understand that, right? So somebody in chat earlier said, hey, I don't agree with what Zayt said, because if you're a new player, you have to VOD review a bunch, right? If you're not that good, you have to VOD review a bunch. And that's why, and that's true, but that's not what Zayt's talking about here, right? Zayt's saying that, sorry, let me get the original tweet. Zayt's saying that he doesn't VOD review much, right? And he's never had to. If you look back at Zayt's history, when it literally comes to competitive Fortnite, Zayt's literally always been one of the top players. Like some of like the other players who probably don't VOD review as much now, there were times when they VOD reviewed, right? Zextra said on my podcast, before I was considered one of the best players in competitive Fortnite, I didn't VOD. I VOD reviewed every single game, actually, he said. Zextra literally said that on my podcast. He was like, I used to VOD review almost every single game I played, right? And a lot of players, I'm pretty sure almost every player I've interviewed on my podcast has said something along those lines. Like Benji Fishy said similar things, I'm pretty sure. And I know Benji still does VOD review now to a fair amount, but he's also one of them players where realistically he probably wouldn't have to. When it comes to these top players, like you're gonna be, you have the game figured out to a point where, like, let's say it's a rotation that you made that was the result of you having a poor game. You can easily identify that, right? And this is something that you guys might see a lot of pros do, right? For the pros that do stream their scrims and stream their practice, do you guys watch people who like after they die or something, or at least one of the people on their team after they die will go back into the replays and just check for something small, and they'll come back and be like, hey guys, for them, that's all they needed. That's all they needed to pick up on their mistake and go back and work on that next time. Whereas, so like, it's like that's all they need to do, right? One person on the team, or maybe it's them, they just go in the replay, look back at where they died, look back at something specific throughout the game that they've already made a mental note of, and that's done, right? Whereas, maybe me, for example, I can't necessarily do that, right? I would have had to go back and watch the whole game and figure out, what is it that went wrong? Was it, you know what I'm saying? So, it depends on your experience a lot of the time. It depends on who you are as a player, and one of the biggest parts of this is just like how intelligent you are, like game wise. Like this leads into a much bigger conversation that doesn't necessarily need to be had now, but it's a thing where when you are one of the top players in this game, it's very likely that in general you just have this kind of brain where things just click differently from you, right? Somebody who we always talk about this with is Mr. Savage, right? Savage is someone who his brain just clicks differently when it comes to Fortnite, right? You know, if you've watched Barla's video about multitasking, you can see when Savage is playing, he's taking note of so many things in just an instant while playing, right? His brain just works that bit differently. So for him, if he's making a mistake, that's something he can pick up straight away while he's playing. Like while he's playing, he can pick up, oh shit, like this was a mistake. He doesn't need to go back and watch a bunch of his VODs to figure out where it is he went wrong. He can just figure out these things because his brain works a bit differently. And a lot of the top players in any game that you watch, and even in sports, right? In a lot of sports, like a lot of the top players can just figure these things out just from playing, like while they're doing it. Does this mean, right, that there's not a lot of value in VOD reviewing? Not at all. Not one bit. This doesn't, like, there's going to be a bunch of people who sees what Zayt said and think, oh, that means VOD reviewing must not be that important. No, doesn't mean that at all. Does not mean that in any way, shape or form. It's just, you have to realize you have to realize perspective. And this is something that I've spoken about so many times in the Fortnite community where people don't seem to understand perspective, right? Like, when I say to people, I like squads, like I enjoy squads, the game mode squads, people look at me like, and I've had pro players look at me like, 11, how could you say such a thing? Squads? But they don't understand my perspective. I'm not a player. As a player, I understand why the squad seasons were probably terrible for you. You probably didn't enjoy squads. I can very much understand that. But my perspective, I enjoy squads. You guys know me. You guys watch my stream. I'm always talking about storylines. I'm talking about, dynamics between teammates. That's the kind of stuff that interests me in Fortnite. I can't get that out of watching comp solos and comp duos the way I do out of watching squads or trios, right? That's why I enjoy squads. You know, that's one of the reasons why. You know what I'm saying? Perspective is a big deal. And from Zayt's perspective, as one of the top players and somebody who's been at the top literally since the first days in competitive Fortnite, sitting there and VOD reviewing for hours isn't going to be effective for him, because oftentimes when you're VOD reviewing as well, like you are VOD reviewing to bring yourself to whatever the baseline is, whatever the meta is, whatever the top level of Fortnite is. You're VOD reviewing to get yourself there. If you are that baseline, if you are that top level, all it is you just fine-tuning mistakes. And these are mistakes that, because of the way his brain works, he can just pick up like that and adjust and fix. Not everyone has that privilege. Do you understand what I'm saying? You've seen Zay open replay mode so many times. Exactly. Right? And that's like, it's one of those things where he can open replay mode, go in, watch back and see something that he's picked up, or it might be something that he's picked up just while playing. He didn't even need to go to replay mode for it. But let's say it is that he's going into replay mode, he just checks back over something and then it's there, right? A lot of the time what happens when players go back into replay mode, I think is a lot of the time it's just trying to see where they missed information. So I think a lot of the time it's just them trying to figure out what small information did I miss, what small detail was it that I missed that led to that. Because like how many times do you hear a pro go back into the replay after the game and be like, oh, I didn't realize there was a guy there, or oh, I didn't realize that was I didn't realize, I didn't realize, like, that's often what it is. Let's see what else Chad has to say. I think the big thing that separates amateurs and pros are that pros are those who are able to identify mistakes and able to instantly apply and actually take the information. Amateurs may struggle. This is something that I said, if you guys remember the legendary stream we had when I had my broken PC, right? I call it the broken PC stream. Is that what we're gonna have to refer to as streamers now? Where we were like ranting in a call with CR, Destiny, and Infamous, all those people. Like we had that crazy. Even Barlow was in there. Barlow was the first person we had in there. Yeah, that stream. When I was in the call and I was explaining to Benji, right? Benji was talking about how like it's not that. Benji was talking about how it's not that hard to get good at the game, and I explained to Benji that like you don't understand that. Benji, you can sit there and watch like a Barlow video, right? Like a 1 hour Barlow VOD review, and just you pick up every single thing he says, just like that, and you can instantly implement it. Whereas the average person trying to, make it into a comp is gonna have to, pay way more attention to the video, maybe even rewatch it. Like some of the top players in our game can learn so much and implement so much into their game within an hour, whereas it might take somebody else, the average Jimmy trying to play the game, 30 hours, right, to implement that same amount of things that the top pros are implementing. That's a lot of the time what is the difference between them. 5 to 10 hours is cap anyway. Yeah, you can definitely probably say 5 to 10 hours is cap in the terms of what he's talking about here as well is sitting down, watching a whole VOD in its entirety, and making notes on that, whatever it is people do on the VOD review. But in reality, right, if you want to, be technical here, if you want to be realistic, when people do that whole thing of going back into replay, checking what they did wrong, or just going back into the replay after the game, that is essentially them, VOD reviewing. They're just reviewing what just happened. They're reviewing their VOD. They're reviewing what just happened in the game. That is VOD reviewing. It's not VOD reviewing in the sense that people, think about it completely. But that is, in a sense, VOD reviewing, right? And if you amount all the time that he's done that in his Fortnite life, just checking replay alone, definitely over 10 hours, probably. Does VOD reviewing help in your opinion? Yes. 100% VOD reviewing helps. What level you're at determines how much it helps, in my opinion. And how effective it is to do it. You know what I'm saying? So if you are one of the top players in EU, right? If you are the Benji Fishies of the world or the, Mr. Savages of the world, not as effective to VOD review. In certain scenarios, right? If you are my skill level, right? Very effective to VOD review, right? For most people watching this video, it will be very effective for you to VOD review in some capacity. And that doesn't necessarily mean VOD reviewing in the traditional way that everyone thinks of, right? Where it's like you go in, you watch your VOD, take a bunch of notes. One thing that I plan to do a long time ago, and I think someone has actually done this in our community before. It might be Convertible from way back in the day. It might be Barlow. If Barlow's still here, he'll be able to let me know. I think it's Barlow though. Where I remember somebody did a stream where they were VOD reviewing for people, like reviewing people's VODs, and it was literally just like, we're gonna go over and figure out the one mistake you made in the game. You might send me a game where you make 70 mistakes, but we're gonna highlight one, just the biggest mistake, one, right? That might be what the best option for you, right? When it comes to VOD reviewing, that might be the best thing for you to do, right? Just figure out just one mistake you're making. What is the biggest mistake you make in this game? And you just focus on that and work at that, right? There's different ways to VOD review. There's different ways for it to be effective for you. You have to figure out your own way. It's just like in school, right? Some of you guys who are still in school, they might have made you do that test where it's like figure out whether you're a visual learner, whatever the other types of learning are. I'm too stupid to know right now. But right, like different people learn in different ways. So, you need to figure out what the best way for you is when it comes to VOD reviewing. And when you do that, it will definitely be effective. But I just thought people don't necessarily understand why this makes sense from his perspective, right? Because, like it says right here, he's a World Cup qualifier. He's a dual FNCS winner. He is one of the best players ever, and he's been at the top of the comp scene since the comp scene was created, you know? So that from his perspective and from all of his experience within the game, yeah, it might not be as effective, right? It might not be, you know, something that he does a lot because he doesn't need to, right? If you absorb all of Zayt's knowledge and Fortnite experience, right, and you just if you just instantly had all of Zayt's experience and knowledge, maybe you probably feel the same, right? So I definitely see where he's coming from, and pardon me, you'll see that trend amongst a bunch of, you know, the successful players in the scene. Sorry, you'll see that maybe they don't vote with you as much now, or for the people, like, I think where you'll see it is people who weren't always top players, right? So Zayt is someone who he's literally always been a top player, and so for him it's like VOD reviewing for him, it's not something that he would have become accustomed to doing. Whereas like the example I used earlier of Zexro literally said, like, before I was a top player, I would literally VOD review every single game, right? He was probably capping or exaggerating a bit, but I definitely believe that, like, he would have been VOD reviewing, like, the level that he was VOD reviewing before he became a top player versus now, probably a ridiculous difference, you know? So, and that doesn't mean that when you're at the top, you don't need to VOD review. That does not mean that at all. It just means that what you're looking for in VOD reviewing and how effective it is for you to VOD review and spend a large amount of time VOD reviewing is a lot less. Right? Just because once you have the meta down, it's like a lot of the people who will spend a lot of time VOD reviewing is because the way they play doesn't align with the meta, and they need to figure out how to put their game to a point where they are playing at the top standard, where if you are playing at the top standard, you're just making, you know, micro mistakes, like mistakes on, hey, I rotated this way instead of that way. Hey, I didn't have this information here. I needed to be aware of what was going on when this is happening, you know, those kind of things where it's not, you don't need to VOD review for 40 hours a week to figure those things out. You play a couple games, you do those mistakes, and you figure out, hey, that's what was happening. And not everyone's brains can do that. But when you're at the top, it's likely that you can. And for the people who tell you that they don't VOD review much, they will either be people who are at the top or people who are just not very good at the game at all. So, yeah. Thank you for listening to my